Bringing in Congresswoman Lynn Jenkins, Republican Kansas, to talk about the budgets. Congresswoman, how are you this morning?
I'm great. Good morning.
Good morning. Glad to have you. You know, we were talking about Paul Ryan has this piece in the Wall Street Journal today, and his plan is to balance the budget by 2023. He says no new taxes. What we'll do is instead of increasing spending at 5% a year, we'll simply increase it at 3.4% a year. And as our economy grows and we keep this spending a little bit lower, we'll end up balancing this thing in 10 years. Are you in favor of this budget?
I am. We gave our budget chairman and the committee some targets to hit, and I think he's hit them all. We'll know a little bit more, after he unrolls it here today. But the Wall Street Journal article laid out all of the components we were looking for: energy independence, a change of direction on health care, some reforms to save Medicare, and then, of course, tax reform, which is my committee and an equal part of the solution.
And, of course, tax reform in this budget is slightly different than what President Obama calls tax reform. President Obama says, yeah, we've all agreed to get rid of these deductions, so let's do it. But he doesn't want to lower the rates while you do it, which is what Reagan did and which we've done every time we've gotten rid of these deductions. He wants to keep the rates the same, which is effectively a tax increase. You guys are saying, hey, let's lower the rates, so we have two rates, 10% and 25%. And we lower the rates on businesses, too, to make it more competitive. But we take out all these crazy deductions and make the tax code simpler, and that'll be revenue neutral, where we're not losing revenue, but we are, not raising taxes on people, right?
Exactly, and it's revenue neutral in a microeconomic model, but you see great growth in our revenues when you put it in a macroeconomic model. That's where you get the growth in the economy, is by reforming the entire code. You don't get that with the president's approach of simply closing the loopholes. We agree with him. You need to close the loopholes, but you need to do a whole lot more. Our entire code is broken. I think every American can agree. It's way too complicated, too difficult to comply with. It's got, a whole lot wrong with it, and we just need to start over.
And I think that's a really cool point that you made about how you score tax cuts in government. And they score it statically. So they'll say, if you cut this tax, obviously you're losing revenue for the government. But history has shown us that every time we do a cut across the board on a marginal income tax and a business tax, that we end up spurring growth in the economy, and we actually end up with increased tax revenues over time. It's happened every single time we've done it. Even with the Bush tax cuts, when they were fully phased in 2003, we had a 39% increase in tax revenues, but they will not score it that way. In fact, Nancy Pelosi the other day, Congresswoman Jenkins, Nancy Pelosi the other day called tax cuts spending.
Well, that is our frustration, but that is the rules that we play by. The best example I can give that people really understand here in our local area is when I was in the State House and we talked about raising taxes on cigarettes in Kansas. Well, it makes great sense. The score comes back, we get all this extra revenue, except for the fact that in a macroeconomic, a real-life model, everyone knows that no one buys cigarettes in Kansas anymore. They simply drive to Missouri or go on the Internet. And in fact, what really happens is your revenue stream entirely dries up when you raise those taxes. So that's an example, I think, that people can understand when we're talking about micro versus macroeconomic models when scoring taxes. And, we just don't want to make a mistake and go the wrong way when we're talking
Understood.
about those policies.
Congresswoman Jenkins here with me, KCMO Morning Show. Now, here's what I'm seeing is going to happen. Okay, first of all, on the conservative side, I know a lot of my listeners are going to say, wait a second, you're still growing the government by 3.4% in spending every year. That's still crazy. And on the other side, you're going to have the liberals say, you're cutting government, you're going to hurt the poor. So how do you answer both of those?
Well, this is like threading a needle, and people have to understand that what we're trying to do is get to a balanced budget in 10 years without, throwing grandma off the cliff. And so, sure, we continue to grow in the next decade at 0.4%, because every day we have 10,000 Americans hitting retirement age. Every day. And you cannot change the rules on people after the buzzer's gone off. And so what we're doing is taking a conservative approach, setting everyone who is 55 and older aside as we talk about Medicare reforms, and make no changes for those folks. They don't have a lot of time to adjust. And those of us that haven't quite hit that mark yet, we've got a few years to adjust. So, we're talking about income adjusting, so folks making over $1 million won't receive that benefit, and then bumping the age a couple years. We're living on average 10 years longer today than we did when those programs were birthed. So, of course, we're going to grow it because we're not going to, cut the folks that are in retirement or near retirement off. But you get to balance because you make the changes for those of us that haven't really hit that age. And this is in stark contrast, of course, to what the Democrats are proposing. The president's budget that he has sent up the last 4 years has never balanced, ever, ever, ever. That's why it never gets any votes on the floor of the House or the Senate. The Senate proposal, they haven't done a budget for 4 years. We have shamed them into it this year. It is anticipated that their budget proposal will never responsible manner, so no one can accuse us of throwing grandma off the cliff.
Well, yeah, and I think that's a big thing is that, and it was a great piece by the guy at AEI the other day that said, you can't come to the American people and say, we want a balanced budget because we're for small government, because you're going to lose a ton of people. You got to come in and say, listen, if we don't balance the budget, all the stuff that we do right now for the truly needy will not be able to do because Medicare's going broke, Medicaid's going broke, Social Security's going broke, the nation's going broke. And if you truly want to help people, you've got to have a growing economy so that more people have jobs, and the people who can't now will actually have the money to truly take care of them with that safety net. But if we don't do this, all those programs will go under.
Exactly. Yeah, Arthur Brooks gets it. And what puzzles me most about the liberals is they don't want to talk about saving Medicare. It's bankrupt in 8 to 12 years. Bankrupt, gone. Do they care so little about the aging population that they don't want to save Medicare? But of course, their budget, I am anticipating, will make no changes there.
No, they'll just raise taxes to pay for it until there's no blood left in the turnip.
Yeah, that's the problem. You can't raise taxes enough. I mean, we already got $1 trillion in tax revenue from the president's health care bill. We got, $620 billion at January 1 that every working American is feeling, that 2%. Now they're coming for the middle class, and we're going to stop that because, you just can't tax the middle class at 100% and ever pay for their spending. We know we have a spending problem. We've got to rein it in.
Congresswoman Jenkins with me here, KCMO Morning Show. Now, one of the things in the House plan is the repeal of Obamacare because of how much it adds to our deficit and all the costs that go along with it and all the new laws and all the new taxes and all the new IRS agents and everything that goes along with it and what it's already doing to our healthcare premiums. You're seeing them go up. But here's the thing. There's no way you guys are going to repeal Obamacare without Republicans controlling the Senate and with this president in the White House. So are you guys going to defund it? Because that you can do, right?
Well, we can't do that unilaterally. I mean, we have a Democrat-controlled Senate and a Democrat in the White House. So anyone who thinks that we can just unilaterally say we're not going to fund it.
Well, but you could unilaterally pass a budget that defunds it and then force the Senate Democrats to pass a budget and then get together in committee and fight for it. And then, of course, Obama would veto it. But that would be at least a symbolic measure of the most you could do to try to stop it now. And that's what people are asking.
And absolutely, we've already voted, several times to defund Obamacare, to repeal it. Our budget, once again, will do that, and of course, we're going to fight hard for that.
Let me stop you 1 second, because here's what I don't think people understand: the inner workings of this. Because what normally happens is House passes a budget, Senate passes a budget, you get together in a committee to try to come up with a budget that can pass both, then it goes back to the House and Senate for one more vote. If it passes, it goes to the president for signature. So people don't quite get what's been happening. You guys have been passing these budgets. The Senate hasn't. So since no budget's passed, we do this thing called a continuing resolution. Well, how do you determine what gets spent then in a continuing resolution? I don't think most Americans know that. Tell us how.
Yeah. we are handing total control over to the administration when the Senate doesn't do their work and we aren't allowed to conference on our appropriation work. What the continuing resolution does is it continues to keep the government open, which we all agree is wise, but it does it at last year's levels. Now, we've just passed a continuing resolution through the House last week that brings it down below $1 trillion for the first time in maybe since '08. We are expecting the Senate will pass a continuing resolution this week. Theirs will have a little more spending, but we will go to conference on this issue. But this is not regular order. Regular order, you're right, is we do our work, they do their work, we meet in the middle and compromise. And that's where the process has broken down. You know, people are unhappy with Congress. Heck, I'm unhappy with Congress because the Senate hasn't done its work. You know, we've gone about passing our budgets. We passed our appropriation bills. You know, we've done tax reform, and the Senate never does their work. Let's hope that this year the Senate starts to do their work.
Well, it's very interesting. We'll keep track of it, and we appreciate your time today. We'll hope to speak with you again soon.
You bet. You guys have a great week.
All the best.